I have read so many good books this summer, like so many books that are going to stick with me for the rest of my life, and I want to tell you about them. A lot of the time I read books like specifically for videos, so I have books that, like, slot into videos very easily, and other times when I'm reading books like just for me, for my enjoyment, I find I don't often talk about them on the channel because I don't have somewhere to put them. So today I'm going to tell you about the last 5 sapphic books I've read and whether or not they're worth reading. Spoiler alert, most of them definitely are. We're going to start with a book that I'm pretty sure is going to go down in history as a classic. Like, this, in 100 years' time, is going to be on the same level as, like, Pride and Prejudice. Big statement from me. That is how much I loved it. Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Obviously, I adored this book with every fibre of my being. I haven't stopped thinking about this. I'm recommending this book to every single person that I meet. I just loved it. I know maybe it's a bit basic bitch. I don't care. Like, Taylor Jenkins Reid gets the accolades that she gets for a reason. Like, people always say, like, Taylor Jenkins Reid is so overrated. No, she's not. She is perfectly rated. I could not name a single other author that is able to consistently write books as incredible as hers, who is able to form such vivid, real characters. Like, her writing gives you such, like, this visceral feeling, like you feel like you were there in the story. It's so easy to get lost in the pages of her books because she just has this ability to take you there. Like, I really want to be an author. I really want to write my own book. I've got so many ideas for books I want to write. But honestly, it's authors like Taylor Jenkins Reid who puts me off, because I'm like, no matter how hard I try, I could spend 20 years writing a book. I am never going to be able to write characters, capture characters in the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid does. I've written in my notes here, the way that TJR is able to weave characters, real, true human characters, where you as a reader feel every part of them, is truly magic. Whether a hero or a villain, a side character, a main character, TJR is able to breathe life into every single person. She is able to give dimension to everyone. And I feel like that sums up my feelings about her as an author just perfectly. And I think this book in particular, maybe more so than all her others, maybe on even par with Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, is going to live inside of me forever. The concept of this one is, I wish I had thought of the concept of this story because it's genius. So our two main characters here are Joan and Vanessa. Joan is our main character and she is a very, very intelligent woman. This is set in the 1980s. And she becomes part of the second ever cohort in NASA to include women on the astronaut training program. And in this program, she meets Vanessa, and the two of them, they don't immediately hit it off. Like, Vanessa's always just kind of there on the outskirts of the group, but eventually they do grow to be very close. Obviously, again, it's the 1980s. Gay rights aren't what they are now, that's putting it lightly. And eventually they come to realise, or Joan comes to realise, that she has feelings for Vanessa. Vanessa is already about as out and proud as you could be in this time. Like, she didn't go around screaming about her sexuality, but like, she knew who she was and she acted on her desires. Joan was never quite there until she met Vanessa and was like, oh, that's what that feeling is. I'm a lesbian. And they start this beautiful, beautiful love story alongside them training to be astronauts within NASA. And there's a lot of pressure on them. They need to be foot perfect at every single turn because they are, like I said, part of the second ever cohort at NASA to include women. They are paving the way for history. They can't make any mistakes because it'd be very easy for NASA to turn around and be like, no women, you ruined it. And they're just very aware they've got all these eyes on them, whilst they're also holding this beautiful, tender, loving lesbian relationship. This book is actually dual timeline, so it opens in space with Vanessa on the space shuttle, and something has gone terribly, terribly wrong, leaving her as the only person who is conscious. And it is up to her to try and get this space shuttle back down to Earth safely on her own entirely. And obviously, opening chapter, you don't have much context for what's going on. And then you jump back in time to when they're both, Joan and Vanessa, starting on their NASA journey. And you basically slowly see these timelines converge into like one timeline at the very end, where Joan is on the ground. She is Capcom. She is the person on the sort of speaker. She is the person speaking to Vanessa on this spaceship. as Vanessa is trying to desperately save herself, save everyone else, and get the space shuttle back down to Earth. And these timelines eventually just converge into one, where Vanessa is up on the space shuttle trying to save herself, trying to save everyone else, and Joan is the one on the ground on Capcom, the one communicating with Vanessa on this ship. And obviously when this book opens up, you have no idea of the relationship between them. By the time you get to the end of the book, you know the relationship, you know the backstory, and you know that Joan is on the ground trying to talk to the love of her life. There are so many things that Joan wants to say to Vanessa, but she can't because the whole world is watching and listening, and it's the 1980s. She can't tell her that she's in love with her. She can't tell her all the things she wants to say. And so there's just this like unspoken thing going on between them, and it is truly one of the most beautiful books I have ever read in my entire life. Like, I've literally, even speaking about this, I've come up in goosebumps. Can you see? Probably not. But the thing that I feel puts this book one step above all of the other very classic romances is that there is another love told in this book, and that is the love that Joan has for her niece Frances. Joan's sister Barbara had Frances when she was very young, and she was never really the best mother. She sort of blamed everyone else for the choices that she made in life, blamed Frances for the fact that she changed her life, and Joan loves this little girl more than anything in this world. So whilst you've got this storyline of Joan and Vanessa's love, you've also got Joan's love for her niece and how she is trying to simultaneously hold a lesbian relationship in a time when that wasn't allowed, train to become an astronaut, and also trying to be there for her niece who is going through a really, really hard time and doesn't really have her own mother looking out for her. The relationship between Joan and Frances is so beautiful, so sweet. That alone made me cry so much in this book, and I just feel like it just adds another dimension, it adds another layer to the story, which in itself is already amazing. I was emotionally invested in this beginning to end. I snot cried for the last 3 pages. My wife was literally looking at me like, are you okay? And no, I was not okay. It was traumatizing. The last 3 pages of this book are some of the most incredible writing I've ever read in my entire life, and I am still slightly traumatized from it. Like, I don't cry easily at books. I really, really don't. Like, it takes a lot to actually make me shed a tear. To make me, like, sob snot cry, that means something. The hype is worth it. The hype is so worth it. Okay, coming off of the back of Atmosphere, this next book is going to be a bit of a letdown. Just let's lower our expectations a little bit. Our next book is The Homecoming by Sabrina Blaum. Blaum? I don't know. The author apparently is German. I have been wanting to read more books about polyamory, but it's not like non-fiction books. I want to read actual romance books about polyamory, but specifically polyamorous women. I don't want to read about 2 women and a man. That's not my vibe. It's not my thing. I want to read books about polyamorous women. And turns out there aren't many of them in existence. This is one of the very few that I found. And this is also free on Kindle Unlimited, so I gave it a go. Would I be mad if I paid for it? Probably. But I didn't, so I think it's okay. My stomach, by the way, is rumbling so much. If you can hear it, I'm so sorry. It is going mad. I've eaten. I had breakfast. What's it doing? So this book is about a throuple. We have a long-term married couple, Rania and Antoinette. They've been married for a long time. They're like in their 40s. And then you have Temper? Her name's Temperance. In my head, I was pronouncing it Tempe. I don't know. She is younger. She's in her 20s. And they are introduced one day by Tempe's grandmother, Rogue. The 3 immediately hit it off. They have a very intense, very quick friendship, until eventually they all realise they've got feelings for each other. The whole thing with Rania and Antoinette realising they've got feelings for Tempe is so weird because, in my eyes, communication is key with things like this, and the married couple don't talk about it at all to each other for a very long time, which maybe I get because, I don't know, they weren't like polyamorous already and it's an awkward conversation to have, but there was points in this book where I was like, oh, this feels a bit cheaty. But anyway, eventually it's all fine because they all talk about it and they realise they've all got feelings for each other. Very cute. Again, this is a dual timeline book. You've got the past, you've got the slow growing of their relationship and how their relationship came to be, and then you've got the timeline in the present day in which Tempe has been in a very, very serious car accident and she is currently in hospital in the ICU fighting for her life. and Rania and Antoinette have no rights to see her whatsoever. They are blocked from seeing Tempe by Tempe's father, who doesn't agree with their relationship, and they have absolutely no legal rights to fight it because they aren't her family. So yeah, I did love the concept of this book, but I just thought the execution was really, really poor. The writing in this, the language used throughout, is so incredibly unnatural. Like I said earlier, the author is German. I don't think this is translated. I think the author is German and wrote it in English, which could account for some of the very sort of clunky language used throughout. It's just kind of like weirdly formal. Like the way this throuple speak to each other is sometimes like they're in a business meeting rather than in a relationship. I just found it really, really odd, and it just felt very unnatural. It didn't feel like three people in love. It felt like a board meeting at a big company. You know what it gives me? It gives me Kevin and Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, only much less funny. Like, the way that they speak to each other is the way that this throuple speak to each other, but in Brooklyn Nine-Nine it's funny. In this book it just reads as really, really weird. I just got the Kindle app up on my phone because I felt like I needed to give some examples of this really strange writing, and honestly, so funny. Even Sam had been more bearable, although Antoinette supposed her buoyant mood over Tempe's improved prognosis could cause that perception as well. Just the writing is so unnatural. What else we got? Oh, there's one point where two of them, I can't remember the characters, have had a bit of an argument, a bit of a bicker, and one of them says, "I didn't mean to upset you or cause any strife." Cause any strife. Also throughout this book, it felt a lot like the author was constantly trying to insert her own personal thoughts and feelings into the characters. Like, there is a whole 2-page long debate about the death penalty that just came out of nowhere, no relevance to the book whatsoever. Just all of a sudden they're talking about the death penalty in this little throuple book. There's another one where one character, I think it's Rania, goes on an entire page long rant about the type of tea that she likes, and it just felt so weird, so out of place. I was reading it and I was like, have I missed some context here? Because this makes zero sense. Also, for a book about polyamory, this book is incredibly polyphobic. Like, throughout the entire book, there's not really any reference to the fact that what they're doing comes under polyamory. They constantly talk about how they're just two people, so Rania and Antoinette. They're just two people who fell in love with another person, and they're just in a throuple, and they don't really talk about polyamory that much, which I thought was weird throughout most of the book. And then it got to the last 5 chapters, and all of a sudden they're having this big debate about polyamory, and the whole thing was very much like, well, it's okay when we do it because it's just the 3 of us, and we're just 2 people who fell in love with somebody else. But when other people do it, it's really weird. When people can have 2 or more partners, that's so strange, so weird. And it was so strange and so judgy, and I was like, this is a book about polyamory, you're in a throuple. And now the author, again, it felt like the author was inserting her own point of view into this. It felt so polyphobic. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was just really jarring to read. I think if you're wanting a book about polyamory that explores the lifestyle, explores the community, explores what it means to be polyamorous, this isn't the book for you. This is not a book about polyamory. This is a book about a throuple who just so happened to be 2 people who fell for one other person, or one person who fell for a couple. This isn't a book about polyamory, which is kind of what I thought it was going to be going in. It actually felt quite grossly anti-poly. It was very hypocritical. It sounds like I hated this book. I actually wouldn't say I hated it. I gave it 2.5 to 3 stars. I really liked the way it was kind of laid out with Tempe in the hospital, and then Antoinette and Rainier are reflecting back on their relationship and how they came to be where they are right now. I liked a lot of the moments where they explored their relationship with each other. I thought the sex scenes were kind of okay. I just thought the writing was so weird and unnatural, and I thought it was weirdly polyphobic for a book about polyamory. Lots of mixed feelings. I also had lots of mixed feelings about this next one. This is The Devil She Knows by Alexandria Belfleur. This is an ARC and advanced reader's copy that I got my hands on because one of my friends works at Penguin. So this is why it's not an actual book. But I got an early copy. I was very excited about it. And I read it. I read it in a couple of days. It was a very quick read. but I didn't love it. And I was very disappointed actually, because I famously love Alexandria Bellefleur. I love everything else she writes. Actually, no, that's a lie. I didn't love the Fiancé Farce. I thought that was just okay. And I also just thought this was okay. This is being released at the end of October, I assume in line with Halloween, because this is a Halloweeny book. It is a supernatural romance. And the concept of this, again, is so interesting. And I think it always really disappoints me when the concept of a book is really, really good and then the execution just kind of lets it down a bit. Like, I always find that a really hard, bitter pill to swallow. But our main character in this one is Samantha. She is a woman in her like 20s, 30s maybe, and she has just proposed to the love of her life, or who she thinks is the love of words, who she thinks is the love of her life, and she has been royally rejected in public. Her now ex-girlfriend says, no, I don't like you, I don't want to marry you. And so Samantha, very downtrodden, very down on her luck, heads back to her apartment where she now has to move her ex-girlfriend out of it. And in the lift up to the apartment, which one was not great for me because I'm terrified of lifts. I struggle to read books, like scenes set in lifts. I can't watch TV shows where characters are in a lift. I can't do it. No. So like that for me was a struggle. I was very brave reading this. Anyway, she's in the lift and suddenly this other woman appears, and it turns out this other woman is called Daphne, and she is a demon. A demon from hell. Demons, it turns out, are attracted to desperation, and Samantha in this moment reeks of desperation. She is going to do anything she can to get her girlfriend back and to get her to agree to marry her. So when Daphne gives Samantha a very interesting proposal where she can have 6 wishes, any wishes that she wants, in exchange at the end of it for her soul, Samantha takes it very quickly. She signs away her soul and she spends the 6 wishes trying desperately to get her girlfriend back. Only I feel like this is the issue with the book. The sort of concept of the 6 wishes made it quite repetitive. So what basically happens is Samantha is in the lift, she makes the wish, you live through the wish where Daphne, obviously she's a demon, she's not going to make it straightforward, she sort of makes it as complicated and throws in as many spanners as she can. Things just go wrong every single time, so Samantha finds herself back in the lift, back in the elevator where she makes another wish, and you go on the same journey again, things go wrong, she's back in the lift. It just got very repetitive, and you sort of knew each time that Samantha made a wish that it wasn't going to end well, so what was the point? At least that was my main issue with it. Actually no, that's a lie. My main issue with this book is the main character, is Samantha. She is such a wet blanket that I found her really frustrating to read. I did not like Samantha as a character. I thought she had zero backbone. She had no fight for herself. She was making terrible decision after terrible decision, and she just really frustrated me. I also thought Daphne as the demon was nowhere near as evil and mischievous and mean as she could have been. I just thought they were both quite weak characters. But with Samantha, I just wanted to like shake her and be like, what are you doing? Because it is so abundantly clear that her ex, whose name I can't even remember, was a trash person. And so there was no like, you as the reader, you weren't sort of rooting for Samantha to have a good time with these wishes. You didn't want the wishes to go well because her ex was clearly awful. But it kind of meant there was no push to want to read the book because you didn't want them to be together. And then eventually the relationship between Daphne and Samantha does start to develop. Obviously that's not a spoiler, you can see it from the from the front page of the book. But the problem is, again, I just felt no spark whatsoever between them. It felt very forced, it felt very contrived. I didn't feel that relationship. Alexandria Bellefleur is usually so good at writing romance, and this one for me just fell a bit flat. Maybe it's a personal thing, I'm not really into supernatural stories in general, but I wasn't rooting for any of the characters. I didn't care for any of them at all, and that just meant the book fell very flat, along with the fact it was just very repetitive. Again, it sounds like I hated it, but when I was reading it, I didn't actively think like, this is awful. I've just sort of had some time to reflect on it. I'm kind of like, meh. It's not my favourite thing I've ever read. But just because I didn't enjoy it, it doesn't mean you won't enjoy it. If you're looking for just a fun, silly, supernatural romance to read around Halloween time, if you're not big into like horror books or thriller books, but you still want to get in like the spooky season, spooky mood, you would probably really enjoy this. I'm always like very careful not to just recommend books that I really enjoyed on this channel, because books are so subjective. Just because I hated a book, it doesn't mean you'll hate a book. Just because I loved a book, it doesn't mean that you'll love a book. So this wasn't for me, but it might be for you. Okay, book number 4, The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. Everyone and their mother is talking about this book at the moment, and that is for valid reason. This book is really, really good. I didn't give this a full 5 stars for reasons that we're going to dive into, but I still think this is an incredible book. So good. This book had a lot of hype to live up to. Like, I was actually kind of nervous going into it because I was like, what if I hate it? Everyone else loves it. What if I hate it? And then I've got to go on the internet and tell people that I hated this book that everyone loves so much. That is one of my worst nightmares. Luckily, I didn't. This is historical sapphic fiction, which obviously is right up my street. I love anything historical sapphic. In a very specific time frame, I've sort of realised I'm currently reading Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. That is historical sapphic romance. I don't like it very much. Struggling a lot, but that's for a future video. This is, where are my notes? I've lost where I was in my notes. This story is told through this very hazy, dreamy, RuPaul's Drag Race Season 1 cloudy kind of lens, where everything feels kind of weird, kind of off, but also everything is completely normal and very mundane as well. You have this slight feeling of discomfort and unease throughout the book, but you're not really entirely sure why. Just something feels off. Something feels strange. And going into this, I would never have described it as a thriller, but I saw some people online describe it as very like psychological, and I do kind of agree with that. There's definitely this psychological element going on in sort of like the back of your mind with this book, but you're not reading it thinking there's going to be this massive twist or there's something sinister going on behind the scenes, because there's not. But there also is like this undercurrent, this layer that you don't realise is there until you get to the twist. I'm not going to tell you what the twist is because that is a spoiler, but it makes for a really interesting, multi-layered read. I wrote in my notes here, how much of the weird is in our narrator's head and how much of it is real. You feel like you're being gaslit until the plot twist comes and the story begins to click together. But I don't even think I realised there was plot twist coming here because it didn't feel like a plot twisty kind of book until the moment it happens, and you don't realise that's what you're waiting for in all of the haze. Honestly, I write notes for all of my book reviews and then I sit down and I just word vomit, I just say things, and then afterwards I'm like, oh, I didn't read any of my very interesting, very insightful notes I actually very carefully wrote down. I need to start actually reading my notes more, but I don't want to just like sit here reading, you know? Anyway, Isabel is a very odd kind of woman. She lives in this big house out in the country outside Amsterdam all on her own, and she has got no interest in life outside of this house. She lives there, like I said, all alone. She has a maid that comes a few days a week, and that is her entire life. Very occasionally she will travel into Amsterdam where she will meet up with her brothers Louis and Hendrik, and that is it. That's her life. She's got no friends. She has got a lover of sorts, a man who is interested in her, but she's not really interested in him. She keeps brushing him off, and her life is just very dull, very mundane. She doesn't really have much going on, but she is also so incredibly judgmental of every single other person in the world. Like, this is not a likeable main character. Isabel is uptight and harsh and very, very cold. You don't really warm to her as the reader at all in this book, I would say, maybe towards the end. But even when it got to the end of the book, I was kind of like, Isabel sucks. I did not like Isabel as a character. But again, I think that's the point. She's not meant to be a lovable, sweet character. She is cold, she is harsh, she is uptight. she's not easy to warm to. Okay, so this book opens with Isabel travelling into Amsterdam to meet her brother Louis's new girlfriend Eva, and immediately, because she is Isabel, she judges Eva straight off the bat. She doesn't like the way she looks, she doesn't like the way she acts, she doesn't like anything about her. Then she spends the entire night kind of like making fun of Eva to her face, and then once they leave, she's making fun of Eva to their brother Hendrik. And then she is very baffled when a couple of days later, Louis and Eva turn up at her big house, and Eva says that because her and Isabel got on so well, she wants to stay with her for the summer for a month, whilst Louis is off working in France. And Isabel is kind of like, no, I don't want this weird woman who I didn't like staying with me in my house where I live on my own. And Louis like, actually, this isn't your house, it's my house, and I let you live in it because obviously it's the 1960s. Have I mentioned this set in the 1960s? It's set in the 1960s. It's like 15 years after the end of World War II. And obviously Louis, being the man, the oldest brother, is the one who owns the house. And he's like, I let you live here. You let my girlfriend come stay with you for a month. So Isabel lets her stay, and over the course of the next month, follows Eva around the house. She is deeply mistrustful of her, and she starts to notice that things are going missing. But again, as the reader and Isabel herself, you kind of feel like you're being gaslit a little bit. You don't really know how much of it is in Isabel's head because she is clearly a little bit unhinged, and how much of it is actually going on. And then eventually they start kissing and doing other things, because it turns out that Isabel is a big old lesbian, and she didn't realise it until Eva came to stay, and Eva is also a big old lesbian. I actually don't know. Bisexual, maybe. Her suspicion turns into interest, which turns into lust and desire, and soon they start this very deep love affair. But of course, this is the 1960s, and things aren't exactly going to be easy for them at all. And it's further complicated by the fact that Eva is Louis' girlfriend, Isabel's brother's girlfriend. Just adds a whole other level of terrible. But Isabel is aware of what being gay means because their brother Hendrik is also gay, and he is about as out as you can be in the Netherlands in the 1960s. He's got a boyfriend, Sebastian, who he lives with. He is very open about his relationship to his family in front of Eva. There's some very touching moments between Hendrik and Sebastian, and Isabel herself has been somebody to really judge and worry about Hendrik over the years, and now she's finding herself in the exact same situation. She's a bit of a hypocrite. Isabel is a massive hypocrite in so many ways, but I just loved that extra layer of like having Hendrik's and Sebastian's love there as well alongside Eva and Isabel's. I also loved the depiction of Dutch culture in this book. I went to Amsterdam this year in January. It's my second time I've been, but I haven't been in many years. And I just fell in love with it. I loved Amsterdam so much. So I loved seeing the city depicted on the pages of this book. I loved learning about Dutch culture. I obviously don't know much about Dutch culture myself, so I can't really speak to how true it is. But the author, she is Dutch. And a lot of the reviews I've read say it's like very true to life. It is very much what life would have been in the 1960s, in the years after the Second World War. And I just love anything that's like true to history. I love that in a book. This book is also deeply sexy in a way that you probably wouldn't expect from a book like this. I saw somebody online compare the sex scenes in this book to the peach scene in Call Me By Your Name, if you know, and that is exactly how I felt. Like, I couldn't have explained it better myself. Like that like longing and desire and lust that is depicted in the peach scene, and like everything that stands for, is kind of what the sex in this feels like as well. It's that lusty, hazy, summertime inability to hold back on your desires. You're hot and you're sweaty and you're not thinking straight, and so you just go for it. You just do the thing. The fact this book came from a debut author is truly incredible to me. Like I said, this didn't quite hit the 5-star mark for me, and I think that's just because it was a bit of a slow start. There were points in it where I sort of felt like putting it down. I wasn't always that compelled to pick it up, and I don't know if it's because of the heaviness of the story. I think maybe the ending was a bit too obvious for me as well. Like, you kind of, as soon as the plot twist was revealed, you kind of knew where the story was going to go, which did not dampen my enjoyment, but it sort of removed that 5-starness for me. 5-star is a feeling, you know, it's a vibe. It just didn't quite have that vibe for me, but that doesn't mean it wasn't incredible, because it truly was. I adored this. But my last book I want to talk to you about, ending on a massive high, is The Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle. This book blew me away. It was truly outstanding. I'm not seeing enough people talking about this book. I thought it was just unlike anything I've ever read before. I felt every single moment of this book. Again, like atmosphere, it made me gasp, it made me cry, like actual tears. Didn't quite have like the sobbing, heaving kind of crying I had with atmosphere, but I wasn't far off. I actually went to a talk with this author in Shoreditch last week. It was a talk with Dylan Hardcastle and Chloe Michelle Howarth, who wrote Sunburn, and it was so interesting to hear their insights into this story, how the story came about. Like, there are people just going around the world with stories like this in their brains, which is amazing to me. Like, why is that so cool to me? I absolutely adored this book and just everything that it stood for. This is also historical fiction. This is set in Sydney, Australia in the 1970s and 1980s and features two unnamed protagonists who we, as the reader, know as Lim 1 and Lim 2. A language of limbs. The narrative switched between the stories of Lim 1 and Lim 2 with each chapter, and they're the stories of two girls who grew up in the same suburb in Australia in the same time, and they are both queer, only they made very different choices about their queerness, about what they were going to act on, about their desires at a very young age. So Lim 1 is caught one night sleeping or kissing a girl, having sex with a girl, I can't quite remember, but she's caught doing gay things by her parents and is promptly beaten up and kicked out. She ends up being picked up by a truck driver who is called Dave, and Dave sees something in Lim 1 that he sees in himself. Dave himself is married, he's got kids, but he is a gay man and sees that queerness within Lim 1, and so introduces Lim 1 to an entire queer family in Sydney, where she basically spends the remainder of her life, the remainder of this book. She joins a house called Uranian House, which is a home for queer displaced people, and Lim 1's story is really one of chosen family, of queer community and queer culture, and how much that means, how important that is. And whilst it is also a love story at multiple points, like love is a huge part of Lim 1's story, I feel like the chosen family is even more important to Lim 1 than the love aspect. And I loved so much how Lim 1's story was told through the queer culture, through the queer community in Sydney at this time. Lim 2 made a very different decision to Lim 1. Lim 2 wakes up one night at a sleepover with their best friend and realises that they have desire for their friend. They are having sexual dreams about their best friend, and makes very conscious decisions in their teenage years not to act on that and actively pursues a straight lifestyle instead, and so goes through the rest of their life, kind of ignoring this niggling feeling in the back of their head that's telling them they're gay, that's telling them something's not quite right. I don't think they're ever like truly aware in like the front of their brain that they are gay, but it's there. There's just this tiny little voice, but she chooses to ignore it throughout her entire life. And so Lim 2 goes through their life pretending, but like acting straight, living the straight life. And both Lims have very tragic stories for very different reasons. Now, of course, this is set throughout the 1980s, throughout the AIDS crisis, and again, both Lim 1 and Lim 2 are majorly affected by the AIDS crisis in their own different ways, in their own stories. And I always say a fascination is a horrible word to have, like, I don't have a fascination with the AIDS epidemic, with the AIDS crisis, because it was truly awful. But it's just a period of history that I've spent so much time trying to learn about, so much time trying to, like, I just want to hear the stories of people in that time. Every time I, like, come across some new media about the AIDS crisis, I feel so compelled to watch it and to learn, because these are people who went through the most horrific thing. These are people who went through a whole epidemic, a whole terrible, terrible illness. Like, the governments across the entire world didn't fight for them, they didn't put in funding, they didn't try and help. This whole community was basically just ripped to shreds by this terrible, terrible illness, and I just feel like I owe it to these people who died to learn their stories and to know what happened and to pay homage to the trauma they went through. And so anything that's sort of set around the AIDS crisis is always going to be something that I want to pick up and read and learn about. And I feel like Dylan Hardcastle did such an incredible job with this book about really showing the devastation that it had on the gay community. There's a page in this where the entire page they just list every single person who they know who died from the AIDS crisis, who died from AIDS. And it's just like every single name is just like a stab to the heart. You spend this entire book getting to learn about and love these characters. And then in the space of a page, they're just taken away. They're gone. And that is what the AIDS crisis was like. They were just taken away and they were never given the dignity that they deserved. It just made me feel what it meant to live as a queer person in this time in the 80s so incredibly viscerally. Like I could feel it in my soul, in my heart, and it broke my heart. Like this book, again, made me cry so much. It was so heavy at points, I did have to put this book down a couple of times, like not even for long, just put it down for 10 minutes and be like, let me just process what it is I just read. And then I pick it up again. I actually read about 70% of this book in one single sitting. I stayed up until about 2 a.m. finishing this because I had to finish it. I had to know how it was going to end, and I love the ending as well. I have seen mixed reviews on the ending. I really liked it. I liked how it worked. Like I said last week, I went to a talk with Dylan Hardcastle where I heard them talk about this book and how it came to be, and I was really interested to hear how in Sydney the queer community is very multi-generational. It's like very normal to hang out with people in their 60s, in their 70s and know and hear their stories. It's very normal to be on the dance floor at a club with people who are 20, 30 years older than you, which is something I don't really think you get in London, maybe occasionally, but most people in the queer clubbing scene, at least in London, are in their 20s, 30s. But it was really interesting to hear how Dylan had so much insight into this period because of their friendships that they've always had, and they've always spoken to people who lived during this time. And you can really feel that, I think, in the book. It feels very real. It feels like it has input from people who are genuinely there, which I think is so important. I will say, I don't think the writing style in this book is going to be for everyone. I was a bit nervous myself after the first couple of pages because I'm generally not a fan of very overly descriptive writing, overly poetic writing in books. So I was nervous. I very quickly fell in love with the flow of this book, and my goal in life is to be able to write as beautifully as this. I can't even imagine being able to like put thoughts to paper like Dylan Hardcastle did for this book. It amazes me. So there you go. There are 5 sapphic books that I've read over the past few weeks that I think were worth talking about. If you have read any of these books, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments and tell me which books I should read next. Do you know of any other books like A Language of Limbs? Because I want to read more like this. I just thought this was unlike anything I've ever really read before. I really, really enjoyed it. But just generally, any books that you think I would enjoy, leave them in the comments. Why not? Make sure you do leave a comment, by the way, if you've got this far. Leave a comment because it's really, really good for telling YouTube that people were liking and engaging with my content. And hopefully then it means more people will watch it and I can keep talking about books on the internet, which is all I really want to do with my life. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.